All right, so now in this video, we're going to start putting this application together. Now, in that last section, we started our image list project and my new React project running on the screen, and we also started our code editor. Now, make sure that you have those open now if you took an extended break, because now I'm going to go inside of my code editor and I'm going to open up that SRC directory. So I'm going to highlight all of those and I'm going to delete them entirely. And then inside my SRC folder, I'm going to make an index.js file. And then we'll put together some of that same boilerplate that we put together inside the index.js file. So I'll say import React from React, import React DOM from React DOM. And then generally inside of here, we would create an app component. But this time, we're going to do things a little bit differently. Told you, learn something. So in total, we're going to end up with a decent number of files inside this SRC directory. So rather than just throwing all of these different files directly into the SRC directory, we are going to try to impose a little bit more structure in this project. Now to do that, inside my SRC folder, I'm going to make a new folder called Components, and we're going to end up creating all of the different components that we create inside of that folder, instead of just the SRC folder. So now this includes the app component as well. All right, so we got that. Now, rather than defining the app component inside of our index.js file, we will make a separate file inside the components directory called app.js. Now, this is a very common pattern, even though we've been putting our app components directly in the index.js file before. But now we're going to end up having a lot of setup code inside of the index.js file besides the app component that we've had before. So rather than putting a ton of setup code inside of the index.js file and at the same time defining an app component, that's going to make a little bit of a mess, right? So we can kind of break these two things down to make it more understandable by putting the app component into its own separate file in the components directory. So now with all that in mind, inside of this new components folder, I'm going to make a file called app.js. And then inside of there, we can very quickly put together some scaffolding for this component and then import it back into index.js to show it on the screen. So I'll do a import React from React, and then I'll make a functional component. And this component will return a div with text, hello world. And I'll do an export default app, just like so. And then back inside of index.js, I'm going to import that new component. So I'll say import app from. Now, remember before with every statement we did for a file like that, we just said // and then the file name. But this time around, to get that app file, we would say in the current directory to // and look in the components folder and then get the app file. So in other words, I would say // components app, like that. All right, so now we've got the reference to the app component. Now we can show it on the screen with a React DOM render. So as a first argument, I will say app, and then I will pass a reference to our div with ID root And that is shown inside the index.html file as the second argument. All right, so now I'm going to save this file, flip back over to our browser, and I should be able to see the text that we wrote. Yeah, I don't think we're going to have a problem with this. Everything seems to be working well. Now then, let's make our search input component inside of the components folder. As I mentioned earlier, the goal of this component is to show our search input at the top of our application. So inside of search input, I'll do my import React from React, and then I'm going to make a class-based component. Now, I know that I need to make a class-based component because I have to use state at some point to handle the user input where the user is actually typing into the search bar, right? So I'm going to say class search input extends React component. Then inside of here, I'm going to define my render function and put in a return keyword. And then inside of a div, I will say search input. And at the bottom, we'll do an export default search input. Now, finally, I want to show this inside of the app component. So I'm going to go back over to my app.js file, and I'm going to import the search input at the top. Then rather than showing the text here, I'm going to show search input. Come on, let's flip back over to the browser. And I see search input. Okay, so that's good. All right, so we know that we don't want the text search input inside of here, right? We just need a text input. So, back inside of the search input, I'm going to replace the text inside of there with a little bit of JSX. You guessed it. And I will say div, because I know this is going to be a multi-line statement. So inside of here, I'm going to place a form that's going to contain my input. And I'll say that the input type is text. And now I can save this, and let's go back and look at our browser. And sure enough, there it is. But of course, it needs a little bit of styling. So in the next section, we're going to hook up that semantic UI. And that way we'll be able to add a little styling. All right. So let's take a break here. I'll see you on the other side in just a second.